Okay, welcome everybody to the Hacc, the first interim workshop for the Hacc 2023, the eighth. This is our 8th year of the Hacc. We are very excited to be able to have another year, and the most exciting news in my mind is that the presentation and judging day is in person this year. So we're very excited to have that be happening. And I think we're all sick and tired of Zoom, so I'm very excited. I know it'll be a little scary for you to give your presentations in person again. But we'll have a class next week. I'll go over that more later. I figure you know me by now, so just in case, I am Thelma Elaine, the Participation and Sponsored Chair for the Hawaii Annual Code Challenge. If you don't know me by now, I guess it's because this is your first year. There are those who have done this more than once. You're probably sick of hearing and seeing me, but here I am again. And I think if I weren't here, we wouldn't all be here. So nudge, nudge, wink, wink about that. But again, thank you for joining the first workshop of the interims. This event is, and as you can see, our agenda is a presentation by Microsoft, and then the afternoon session is breakout rooms with the sponsor chairs again. I can get the slide deck to move. I guess I've already said that. I do want to say that this event is proudly presented by the state of Hawaii and the Office of Enterprise Technology Services. And this year we are in partnership with the University of Hawaii. They're supplying the room for us for that amazing final we're going to be having. So. And I want to also thank our other sponsors, because if we didn't have sponsors, that would be another reason we wouldn't be here this morning. And those amazing prizes that we're going to be giving out would not be here. Our terabyte sponsors include Google, Hawaiian, Transform Hawaii Government, Verizon. Our gigabyte sponsors include Tyler Hawaii, Microsoft, and also presenting today, eWorlds and Salesforce. And our megabyte sponsors are Hawaii Data Collaborative and AT&T, and our kilobyte sponsor is AWS this year. I also want to thank our community partners, IMAC Foundation, HTDC, Hawaii Pacific University, Information and Computer Sciences at the University of Manoa, and the Department of Education State of Hawaii for their computer sciences team. Your co-hosts today are myself, as you can see on your screen, and in the background, being quiet like she normally is Sheila Bayukakar, and I'm getting it. I just butchered her name. I used to have it written. Oh, here it is, still written down here. Bayuk-Ajar.
Sheila B
is here with us again, and as you might remember, she is also our fiscal sponsor, and she is managing the money, and she will be paying you out your prizes when you win something. So be nice to her for whatever she will do. Let me see my next slide. Okay, so before we get started this morning, I just want to quickly, why do I think that's not right? I did today's agenda. Again, I'm going to skip ahead a minute. I think my slides are out of order. Okay, once again, our agenda, Rich Antonow doing a session on security and privacy, and the afternoon is the challenge sponsors. These are important dates that you want to know. Technical review begins Monday, November 13th at 9 a.m. You must have submitted your project by that time. It alerts the judges you're ready to be reviewed. If you submit at 9:15 or 9:30, no one's going to penalize you, but you can't submit after a certain time period because they won't review you. So, and that's mostly, you want to make sure you have working shared code available. What's going on here? Wednesday, November 15th is when we'll announce the team selections. And Friday, November 17th, we're going to have a tech check at the University of West Oahu, where we're going to be having the live session. And then Saturday, the next morning, we will be having the actual tech presentation day. Almost there. Oh, finally, back to Rich. Please review all tech and judging criteria on the hackhawaii.gov. Please be aware your security and privacy answer must appear on the submission form. This question is worth 5 points. Don't miss out on this. So, which is a great segue in today's first session. So I'd like to welcome, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because we'd rather see his handsome face than the dang slides.
Hold on. We need an icebreaker. An icebreaker.
Okay. Oops. See, I missed it because I put it in the wrong order. Back. Thank you, Sheila. All right, back to where I was. I guess I had the order right. I just messed up in my head. So forgive me, everybody. So before we move on, we're going to have an icebreaker. And the 8th person that answers this question, remember, don't answer anything in Slack chat yet until Sheila writes the word go, because if your answer is above the word go, you don't get counted. So wait a minute. Okay. So the 8th person who enters their answer in the chat to the question when we type go wins a $25 Amazon gift card. Ready? Sheila, you ready?
Ready.
What is your Halloween costume this year? Go.
Oh.
Yep, people jumped the gun again.
Yeah. Keep going.
Like, go.
I said the word go. I carefully said wait till it's in chat, but well, okay.
Well, the people that are above the go, keep going. Put your stuff back in there.
Yep, do it again. All right. Okay, now that we're back in the right order, let me get back up to where I was. I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, back to Rich, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, which I think I've already done. No, I have already stopped sharing my screen. Okay, so we are going to highlight Rich, spotlight you. So before you get, so Rich Atanal from Microsoft and his presentation on security and privacy considerations in the application development. Rich is a technical specialist role for security and identity. He supports accounts with all things security as it relates to cloud and on-premise identities, user synchronization, identity protection, data application, device threat protection, and advanced EDR-XDR solutions. Rich has been with Microsoft for more than 5 years, primarily covering the region. He, I think, is not covering them, and it's 6, 7 now, because this is old data from probably 2 years ago.
I think this is the third year doing this.
He still resides in Phoenix, Arizona. So I'll let Rich fix any errors I made on that. I know he's working in a different territory these days, but I do want to state that he'll give you some great information, because this is one of the important answers for your security question is, how do you protect people's identity? How do you protect the data in the system? Back on to you, Rich. Take it away.
Thank you. Thelma, can I ask, could you give me like a 15-minute, I don't watch the time on my system. Can you give me a 15-minute check before the end?
I can do that.
Much appreciated.
And Rich has asked that you turn on your mic and ask a question, or ask a question in chat, and he would really love for you guys to be interactive. So please try to ask questions, because this is an expert. Take advantage of somebody, a professional security guy. Ask questions.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody. Aloha. As stated, I'm in the wonderful sunny state of Arizona. Beautiful morning here, and I hope it is where you are. This, as you heard, this is actually my 3rd year. I believe it's my 3rd year doing this for the HACC, and as of last year, I'm not even covering Hawaii anymore, but I enjoy doing this and interacting with the organization so much that I'm volunteering to continue doing it, even though it's not my patch. So it's all good. I very much enjoy this. As Thomas stated, I work for Microsoft as a security specialist. I'm specifically on the pre-sales side. But really, I cover all of our threat and identity protection solutions. Now, it's interesting because nowhere in there did you hear the word code writer, because I'm actually not. I do have my bachelor's degree is in computer sciences. I am well versed on being able to write code, but that's not what I do for a living. However, everything, and as we're going to talk about, everything has a basis in security. I mean, you can't get up and check your phone in the morning and look at your emails without finding at least one attempted phishing message or something really sketchy in there. Hopefully, you're not seeing them; they're getting pushed into your junk mail already. But we know they're getting much better. So security isn't everything. Part of my goal for this presentation and discussion, not just presentation, is also to bring awareness to you that you have to have a security mindset, a security focus as you're developing codes. Don't even think about, well, how do I protect this, this, and this? You have to have the mindset that as I'm developing code, as I'm gathering requirements, that I'm thinking about the bad things that could happen and how they might take place and how can I assist in preventing that. So let's see if we're working here. Yes. All right. So by the way, if it looks like I'm looking over the screen, I might be. I have a bigger screen behind mine, so a little easier to see for me. So here's my general agenda for today. And again, I state that I love being interactive with my customers. Being pre-sales, I'm always talking directly with my customers. So just remember, sometimes the question that you don't ask is the question somebody else wanted the answer to as well. So if you like it, feel free to speak up. So we're going to talk quickly about some of the threats out there. Zero trust. I'm going to explain what zero trust is and why, again, as a code writer, zero trust overall is important. Then, of course, we're going to get into the core of design and developing secure code. Then let's talk about, great, you've written the code. Now what? How do I protect it? And then, considering I am with Microsoft, I'm going to bring you the last two pieces are basically bringing you Microsoft's take and how are we doing. I want to show you the cool new tool set called Defender for DevOps that hopefully you will run across in the future. It is something that's active today that we're out engaging with our customers. And then, you know what? Anybody hear about this artificial intelligence, this AI thing out there? Maybe you want to know what's going on there. So I'm going to bring that. So hopefully this will be a little bit of energizing for everybody. So because we're going to have discussions today, anybody know how I can get rid of this on the top? It's okay. All right. Let's start out with some definitions of terms that I will probably use today, right? Code, programming instructions, right? That's what you write. Debugging. Well, debugging is the process of identifying and taking bugs out of computer software. So therefore, programming must be the process of putting those bugs in the first place. Programmer. Come on, you know this is true. We're going to talk about threats, right? Threats are actions triggered by a threat source, usually to try to exploit weaknesses in the environment, the system, the protocols, things of that nature. And we're going to hear a lot about bad actors. Basically, that's the bad person. So let's get started, shall we? Here's the reality. There's much I can't talk about because one of the trusts that Microsoft, one of the things that our customers trust us is that we don't talk about our specific customers and what challenges they may be going on. So I'm going to talk generalities. Every single day, the bad actors are out there 24/7 using the internet, using computer, using bots, using all sorts of methods to try to hack environments. It's happening 24/7. The prime entities that are being attacked are government, education, retail, public utilities. Can anybody random a guess as to why those are the most attacked? Any guesses? It is twofold. The first one is because of the sheer size and the number of potential entry points. Think about education, right? How many schools, how many K through 8 schools, how many middle schools, high schools, how many colleges are there? There's a sheer number out there, and because they have a need to interconnect and talk with each other, that means there's pathways. So if I'm a bad actor, all I got to do is find the weakest link and propagate down through and go start penetrating other areas. A very common moniker in my business is you have to be right 100% of the time of protecting your environment. The bad actor only has to be right once, right? I'm here to not give you good news. The good news, or the bad news, is AI is upon us. Why is that bad? Because at least what we've had as a security focused mindset, what we've had before is in order for somebody to get through and actually have some type of a threat campaign, something more than just your basic horribly worded phishing campaign, right? You had to have somebody that had the coding chops to do this. You know, we're talking nation state actors, we're talking well-funded organizations, you know, that are going out and doing these campaigns. AI is going to break that model. AI is now going to give the average Joe who just wants to do a bad thing and doesn't know a darn thing about coding, they're literally going to be able to just ask AI, write me a piece of code that can go out and steal credit card numbers and personal information, make it look like application XYZ, and then save this data over here and do it on a secure protocol. AI is going to write that for them. So our challenge overall becomes tenfold. On my side, my job is literally to help organizations stay out of the news and have their people and data protected. Your job is to know about these, think about these, and then as you're developing code or as you're part of the larger team, that's probably the next thing I want to bring up. Just realize that if coding is your venture and where you want to go in business, you will not be working in an isolated vacuum. You will be working as part of a team. You're going to be one of the cogs in that bigger wheel. Each member of the team, each section of the team has specific needs and specific requirements. All of you have a requirement for security, and in your case, developing secure code. Okay, and that kind of talks about here. I did a quick search to see what the most prevalent are. I could have written these with my eyes closed anyways, but I wanted to see if there was anything that was coming out there. It is incumbent upon you as a member of that team that is going to be producing code or producing applications to have an awareness of what's going on out in the wild. That's what we call it. Basically, everybody connected to the internet. You're all out in the wild. You're all fending for yourself, right? What's going on out there? These are some of the more common and the most pernicious attacks going on. Some of them are under the covers. Some of them, like phishing, they're blatant, right in your face. Unfortunately, no matter what we do as in our case, Microsoft is a leading security provider, no matter what we do, the weakest link is always going to be that meat puppet, the human. We're the weakest link. Because, well, let's face it, who doesn't want to see a dancing cat video, right? People are going to click on things they're not supposed to. They really, really think there is a Nigerian prince that just wants to give away billions, right? People gotta be people who do that. So unfortunately, we're going to have to work around it. That means any of the code that you write, you have to take into account what would a bad actor try to do with this code? Is there a way when I'm developing it that I can prevent it? Am I using weak protocols? Am I requiring true authentication, or am I just taking a social media account and using that as their identity? Okay. Questions so far? Comments are good too. Okay, be that way. We're going to continue. Let's talk about designing secure code. Now, before we talk about designing secure directly, I need to bring up this concept of zero trust. Zero trust again, you're part of a team. Zero trust is not something specific to code writing. Matter of fact, nowhere in here does it say anything about writing code, but the underlying assumption is that the applications and the code that you might write, that's the entry point for users or the people that are going to use a capability. That's how they get into there. They're either accessing an organization to use an application, to access some data, to try to pull data and aggregate some kind of results. So you're heavily influenced on this. Zero trust is a principle. It's not a Microsoft thing. We've been adhering to it for quite some time, as all of our major partners out there, as well as our competitors. Zero trust is not something new. What is new is how we as security vendors continue to adopt our products and more fully integrate this. And my job in the pre-sale side is working with my specific customers to impress upon them how important all these pieces are, that if you plug the holes in these three places, but you have a big gaping hole here, where do you think the bad actor is going to go? Okay, so what are the three principles of zero trust? The first one, the foremost one, is assume breach. Assume breach. What does that mean? Assume compromise. It means that always assume, you can read it, but I'll write here. Assume attackers can and will successfully attack anything. Applications, identities. Okay, let's bring that home then. How does that relate to you and say code writing? Well, if you write a piece of code, or let's just call it an application, you write an application, and that application is going to provide users access to specific types of data. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that the user that accesses your application has been validated and is who they say they are, and that the data that they are trying to get to, they have authorization for? Is that yours? Is that somebody outside of your application? Are you dependent upon something else? Like in our case, Microsoft Azure is our cloud-based identity source. That is where all of our organizational identities, both Microsoft and all of our partners and peers that are using Microsoft Azure, that's where the identity source is. So, you have to ensure that you're just not allowing somebody to bring in session tokens and just randomly allow that. So always assume breach. Number two, verify explicitly. Meaning, if somebody is trying to get to a particular application or a subset of your application, there's always branching in code, right? Verify. You need to ensure that when that request goes to a particular place to try to go to another place, verify that that's specifically the only location that can be branched to. Bad actors will always look for that hole to go, hey, I can get here and go over to here, but if I type in this other little snippet, I can get around that HTTP code and force it to go to a different location. So always verify explicitly. And finally, use least privileged access. When you're working with the greater team, and then you're writing an application or code for an application, you do not want to allow the user of that application or of that code to access anything more than they need to, especially as it relates to data. Especially data. So always try to provide least privilege access. How does that weigh in with your code writing? So for instance, many times when I'm working with an organization and we're looking at tools that we're providing them to be able to do things like least privilege access, they're going like, okay, when users log in, they're going to use Azure for their identity. We're accepting that. It's going to force HTTPS. We're going to force multi-factor authentication. The user gets to the application. And now I'll usually ask, okay, when the user gets to the application, do all users getting to that application have the exact same privileges? Once they get there, Can they all do the exact same thing? Probably 9 times out of 10, the answer is, oh, no. No, this type of user, they're going to do this type of work and they need access over here. But this type of user, it's like, okay, how are you ensuring that happens? What are you keying on? What are you counting on something outside your code to determine where this user has access to? I'm going to use one of the partners that you saw on the screen, Salesforce. Salesforce is very good at this. When you create a Salesforce account and or you can leverage it within Azure, you can assign you as whoever the administrator that creates the users in Salesforce, you can assign that user to a specific user type within there. It could be a knowledge worker, it could be a standard user, it could be a limited user, it could be, you could even custom create. So the process is when somebody gets an account created in Salesforce, whoever is performing that activity and creating the account, they explicitly assign them to a group or multiple groups. Now, when that access is used to get to another resource and being validated in our account, or in our instance where they're being validated through Azure to get to Salesforce, once they're validated, we pass that through. We also take their user group permissions and bring those across. Those permissions can then be used to determine where should this user be able to go, what type of data should they get, what type of data should they not get. So least privilege access. Any questions on that? This is a really fundamental principle that everybody needs to understand.
Please feel free to unmute and ask some questions. As Rich says, this is stuff that is critical for you to have in your mindset and in everything that you do. So this is the time to ask questions. Feel free to put it in the chat and we'll ask it for you.
And remember, it's worth 5 points on your technical score, and 5 points. It's 17% of your tech score review. So don't mishandle this piece, because this is an easy 5 points, and I've seen actually push somebody over the edge to a higher score because they answered the question and somebody else didn't.
Exactly. You know, let's just say it's been a long time since I was a college student myself, but I kind of had a minor in math, and I'm pretty sure 17% is a pretty substantial amount to just give away. All right. Well, having said that, feel free at any time. You can always drop in the chat window. I'm sure Thelma or one of our other moderators would be more than happy to. All right, let's talk specifically about secure code design. Microsoft, because of our size, I'm going to throw this out here. Microsoft is the absolute largest security provider that many of you have probably never heard of as a security provider. I'm well aware of that. I have the discussion all the time. We always have been. We have the largest footprint in the world due to not only the size of our organization, but the sheer number of user objects, accounts, device accounts. I mean, think every Windows workstation, every Windows server out there, all of the Azure accounts, all the Hotmails, all the Xbox, the LinkedIn, the GitHubs. I mean, we're by far the largest. And how do we primarily make our money? We write software. So we do have a very defined software development lifecycle, specifically for security. As you see on the screen, Microsoft Security Development Lifecycle. My intent is to provide these slides to the team after the fact. I'll figure out how they need to be posted. On the bottom of the slide is a link. In most of these pages, the information that I'm providing there's a link to where I'm getting that from. So when I say it's provided, it's very, very well documented. I'm taking it and breaking it up into smaller subsections here to be able to present it this way. Okay, so in our secure design, it is a 7-step process. Again, I tell you, you will not be working in a vacuum. If you're working for any organization of any size, you're not going to be working as a team of one. you're going to be part of a greater team. And in order for a team to work effectively, they need a methodology, they need a process, they need an iterative solution, they need different team members to have different responsibilities. I mean, for instance, something that never happens. You should not be the one to cross-check your own code. That would be silly, right? You can't find your own mistakes. That's where, you have to have checks and balances. So those are built into the principles. So just leveling out, the seven different steps are going to be broken up into three phases. And right now, those 7 steps are the training. Training means a couple of things, and I'll get into this in depth here on the next slide. Training doesn't just imply learning how to write code. Nope, not when we're talking about secure development lifestyle. Training also involves training you for what to look for as far as the security threats, what's happening, what's the newest. Again, in my world, we call it security via whack-a-mole. What that simply means is, as soon as somebody reports a bug, somebody determines that there's a threat vector entry point to a piece of code that we have or an application. Microsoft has a method. As part of this method, Microsoft has a component within the method to go plug that hole. Oops.
And Rich, I have a question for you, by the way.
Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
From Taryn, she's saying, you mentioned that social media accounts as an identity are a problem. Could you please elaborate? And then I had thought it would be preferable to allow for Google login rather than entering a password.
Sure. Okay.
Can you elaborate, please?
Happy to. Thank you, and thank you for the questions. All right. So let's make the statement here. Can we generally agree? I'm gonna pick on Facebook because it's also social media, but it's gonna apply to your question as well, right? Can we all agree that just because somebody creates an account on Facebook, gives it a name of John Smith, and that John Smith lives in Seattle, Washington, and runs a coffee shop, right? Just because somebody created that account, does that actually mean that that's a John Smith and it's not somebody from a nation state actor that basically not only doesn't run a coffee shop, but they don't even like coffee, right? I can't verify as a security person and as the person writing secure code, I can't validate that user is who they say they are. So therefore, if I were to allow the BYO, bring your own identity, BYOI, I can't verify that. So are there times when I do, you might be asked to allow BYOI? The answer is yes, and we do that, by the way. Microsoft Azure, that's where we hold identities. Azure actually can hold 4 different types of identities. One is a synchronized identity from on-prem up into our Azure. One is a cloud-only identity, so basically one that the organization creates directly in there. One of them are invited business-to-business guests. So if I have a partner consulting firm and I need to share data with them, I can directly invite them. But see, that's more trusted because I'm inviting John Smith at construction.widgets.net. And I know that when they accept that, the only way they accept it is because I send it directly to that organization, to their email, and for them to be able to get that and respond, I know they are who they say they are. The fourth one we can accept is we do allow organizations to do business to consumer, to constituent, to customer, B2C. In that case, they are, if you want to allow it, we do allow using BYOI. But what's the difference? We don't trust those identities. And so therefore, when we're doing B2C, those identity objects are actually held in a separate tenant, isolated from the main tenant where all the rest of the user objects are. And then remember that only allow explicit access. So those users that we are allowing to have identities in there, we are only giving directed access to the specific application that we're publishing. Classic case in point. You're an organization, you were asked to write a widget, an application to allow people to pay their parking tickets, right? Well, you can't possibly invite 1.2 million people from the county of Los Angeles to the organization because you don't know who they are. So you have to have some way. So you, as part of what we're going to talk about here, gathering requirements, you and the team will determine, will we allow social identities? Do we really trust them? If somebody's going to, I mean, let's try a little tact here, right? Do we trust it? I just told you I don't. However, if somebody's logging in for the purpose of going to pay a parking ticket, does it seem reasonable that a bad actor is going to go, I've got nothing better to do than I'm going to go pretend I'm James Smith. I'm going to go pay her parking ticket, right? Probably not. So depends on what the use is. So we do allow it, but that's why we don't necessarily trust that. Okay, so it was a long answer, but I hope that was sufficient. Pardon me, can you repeat what the second part was? It had to do with Google, but I forgot what the whole
and I know what she's talking about because there's ad nauseum. I log into sites that say, do you want to log in with a username and password or email address and password, or do you want to log in with your Google account? And I think that's what she's referring to there.
Okay, sure. That goes along with the trusted source that I was talking about. So in the case of Google, and we do the same thing, right? I could have said the same thing for a Microsoft account. If I say I'm going to log in with my Google account and I'm going to allow that, or I'm going to allow somebody to log in with their Google account, I am making a trusted relationship with Google that I or my environment, so the one that's hosting that application, I am not validating who that user is. So what I'm doing is when I say log in with your Google account, I am trusting that Google is the one doing the authentication of that user. So when the user goes to log into Google, they have a username password in Google itself that when they log in there and Google validates them, we're trusting that you did your part. You confirmed that user account and their password match, and I hope something like MFA was used as part of it. I can dictate that has to happen as well. But the idea is I'm not authenticating the user. I'm not making them create an account in my environment. Now, again, I do say that that's a perfectly valid way. But when you go to the requirements, that's part of what has to be brought up. Are we going to allow that? Do we trust that source? Are they doing enough? So I hope that was the answer. And we allow the same thing, and in reverse as well. You could also select a Microsoft account, an Outlook account, in which case they're logging in with their Microsoft account, their commercial Microsoft account, and Microsoft is the one doing the authentication.
And may I add something there? When I do work for the state of Hawaii, I log into one account, which is my Microsoft Hawaii account. And it then gives me access to all the other things I need to do. So that would be an example of that. But I also want to point out that that's a really important decision. And what should be impacting that decision is, what is it like? If I have I don't ever use my Google account for my health records, my bank accounts. So you got to think about what your application is doing and whether or not you can be a little more lax or not. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I get messages from people from LinkedIn of all places, and they're fraudulent accounts. I usually catch it because I research before I respond to people who are unknown to me. So be aware of that. Sorry, thank you.
No, thank you. All true. I mean, you heard me a little tongue in cheek, but not really when I said earlier it's us humans that are the weakest link. It's 100% true. I mean, I've got examples. I was going to put them in my slides and I didn't bother because of the time we had allotted. But I've got 3 or 4 just this week that were pretty blatant. So phishing attempts. Here's a generic thing I'm just going to throw out. It has nothing to do with design. So this is Rich, a security guy, talking to you. If you get an unsolicited email from a user from an organization, and they're asking you, hey, we identified something bad happened with your account. You should go on, you take this link, and then we'll pass you over. The understanding is click on this link to fix that, right? So, hey, Navy Federal Credit Union, I got one the other day. Navy Federal Credit Union, your account's been compromised. We've got it locked out. Go to this link here. You can log in and then verify yourself and get it unlocked. Oh gosh, that sounds like something I need to do. Well, first of all, I don't have an account at Navy Federal, so pretty sure that didn't happen to me. But what's actually happening, right? Do you really think that link that they're sending you to is actually Navy Federal Credit Union? Let's say you actually are a user and by chance, that you read this and go, oh shoot, I need to go do something about this. Well, what's going to happen is you select that link, it's going to take you to a false page that is going to look very similar. They're going to have the exact same, they're going to do a screen capture of an actual Navy Federal Credit Union login page. It's going to look identical. On the surface, you're not going to tell the difference. But what they're actually doing is when you put in your username and password, hit enter, they're capturing that information. What do they have now? Their username and password, right? And now they can attempt to use that for other things. So sometimes if it smells too good to be true, it probably isn't, right? So that not much more to be said there. I can go for hours on that, but let's get back into the actual design and security. I told you it's broken up into 3 different phases. On the bottom is the link to this specific phase, the actual design piece. The design piece incorporates training, requirements, and design. So training, as I said, is not just about training yourself on how to write code. It's also training yourself either through the organization or take it upon yourself to learn the type of things that I'm talking about. What are the threats out there? How do those threats work? What is a phishing attempt and how does it work? What's an ATEM attack? How does it work? Because if you know how they work, or at least understand them on the surface, you can have in your mind, when I'm developing this code, how could the bad actor leverage what I'm writing right now to do that bad thing? Oh, yeah, okay, I need to change this piece because that's going to give them an attack vector. Okay, so the training is not just that. Requirements. You'll see I highlighted it. Requirements is one of the most crucial steps. It's always been one of the most crucial steps, even if it has nothing to do with security. The requirements are, what does this application, this piece of code need to do? What are all the parameters? As you get better and better in your job, the way you're going to get better is by asking the right questions. You need to, if it's not given to you, you need to get the answers before you even go forward. What does this application need to do? Who needs to access it? Who shouldn't access it? Are there federal regulations for what this application has to meet? Does it need to have a specific certification? Where are the data? Where's the data stored behind it? What protocols are going to be used? What kind of client's going to be used? Are we going to be enforcing AES, 256-bit encryption? Requirements are super important. All right. You should not even think about launching anything until you have fully gathered requirements. Again, think team effort. You need to be asking questions. The others on your team should be asking the questions. And this is where you have to be able to push back. If you're getting conflicting requirements, this is something I used to do. Not code writing, but in the type of work that I used to do in the network and cybersecurity world. I would get requirements from different teams, right? Not my team. I'm talking the customer. Oh, we need this. We need this. I go to this other organization or a team within the organization. They give me a requirement, and I'm documenting all this and going, wait. These two conflict with each other. So now it's upon me to go. I can't do this thing because these two requirements don't work together. So now it's upon me to go back to each of them, tell them that you both have different requirements. What's driving your requirement? Where is it coming from? Okay, so I can't underemphasize how big gathering requirements thoroughly and appropriately are. Okay. The design phase. The design phase is pretty straightforward as far as design is design, right? What you need to take into account is not just the design of what is going to meet these requirements, and some of those requirements darn sure better be security requirements, but what are all the components of the design? You know, I mentioned a couple, right? Where's the access the application going to run? Is it going to be a SaaS app? Is it going to be a federated app? Is it going to be an application that is running off of a server? Is it going to be an application running off a server and the server is clustered? What's the backend data source? Does it have a data source? Is it going out making multiple queries? What protocol is it going to be using to make those queries? What kind of client is going to be allowed to access? Are there clients that shouldn't be allowed to access? The design is really, really critical. And then when you look at where this app is going to be running, guess what you have to do? You have to figure out what kind of load that this application will put on whatever that hardware is. So you can tell that if you think writing code is nothing more than putting the code pieces together and getting an outcome, that's like minimal piece of it. It's all the things wrapped around the back end that are more important. Okay, let's move over the stack. So after that, now we're into the develop the secure app. Okay, so implementation. The implementation phase is where you're basically going to take the requirements you got. You now know based on the design what it's intended to look like. By the way, I left out kind of a crucial step in there. In all programs, when you get to a design, I can guarantee it won't be you don't get to decide, yep, this is what we need, we're moving forward. I guarantee in a team, especially if it's an app of any criticality, there will be a review board. There will be somebody other than your team that will review your design. And just like I told you to throw up questions, they will throw questions back at you, right? So it has to be an approved design. Implementation is great. Now that you have an approved design, how will it be done? How will who's going to write the code? When the code is written, how is it going to be tested within there? Where will it be hosted? Do you have a dev environment? Are you going to do it as a pilot? Is it going to be a proof of concept in the production environment? Do we have blackout dates where we can't make any production changes? There's a lot. So hopefully what you're getting from me here isn't just completely security focused. I'm trying to let you know the real world of what you're going to find out there. You will have a really good life working as an app developer because it's a great trade to have. You're going to have lots of really cool people like me to work with, but the idea is you're not going to be working in a vacuum. Yeah, you're still going to be drinking Mountain Dew and eating pizza at 2 a.m, but you're going to be working as part of a team. Okay. I also, in the link down at the bottom for the learning site for this, we even reference that this stage also very heavily leverages tools to do your development. Understand that some organizations will drive a specific set of tools as a standard, say, for consistency, these are the tools that you must use. Some will give you a smaller subset and say, here's the tools you can use for this. For the other parts of this, you can get whatever tools you want. Not very common, by the way. And we provide through the Azure Marketplace, we provide access to a lot of different tools. Many are free, but like I said, the reality is, depending upon the organization you're working for, they will probably drop which tools you can use. Okay, the verification phase. I've already said it. The verification phase is going to be done by an outside entity. In this case, outside entity could simply be somebody or some team outside of your development team, or it could literally, like Microsoft, it can literally be an outside verification entity. We have certification requirements for all of our public-facing applications. They have to be certified. We do not do the certification. You know where that comes into play? Timing. When we go to release, when we get to the release phase, we have a certain time where we'll put it in what's called private preview, and then public preview. Public preview means it's already been tested. You can call it a beta test if you will. we're now making it available to the public, and we're going to do this for a period of time. Well, we're doing that for two reasons. One, so that we can get more feedback from customers of usually it's tweakages on, hey, you know, the user interface, you got these 4 items under this subpage. This one here really seems like it should be over here. When I click here and I get these results, I think they should be formatted different. You know, we're looking for those type of feedback, right? But the other thing we're doing is there's a certain amount of time that the external vendors require to do the validation, the verification and validation to meet regulatory compliance for those particular apps. But we're buying ourselves some time. We're getting that extra feedback while we're waiting for the app to actually get there. Questions on that? I'm throwing a lot out here. If you're picking up 1/10 of what I'm telling you, you're already getting a lot of information. Okay. Deploy. All right. You've written code. You've sent it out for validation, or the validation process has taken place. Now you need to get it out there. So the release phase, again, this is going to be heavily leveraging project management. So you as the code writer have a certain level in here. You're still going to be part of the team, but once you've designed the code and it's gone through delivery, the release phase is how does it get out to the end users, right? Even something like you're creating an app. How will it get to the end users? Are you going to publish it in Amazon Marketplace and Google Cloud Services? And is it going to be available? Are you going to work with Apple and Android, you know, to get it onto theirs? And by the way, if you've ever tried that, it's not just asking Mother May I. There is a very, very detailed process to get anything through Apple to be able to be a certified app in there. So all of this is project management. So there's a lot to this. So this is also another reason why the code development process is a lengthy process. It isn't just, wow, it's going to take forever to write this code. No, even if the code's reasonably, you know, simplistic to be able to put together, I need to downplay it, but maybe it's not a super complicated app. Everything wrapped around it, from the validation, the testing, the proof of concept, the pre-release, getting permissions, validation. Okay, so release phase, and then the last one. If you're in the app dev section, you are most likely not primarily responsible for the response phase. But what the response phase is, you can't just put an application out there and go, done, never see it again. No. It's highly, if this is an application for an enterprise, you know, an enterprise class application, hopefully it's got a good lifespan to it, and it's going to have revisions and iterations and upgrades. And I'm sorry to tell you, it's going to have security hotfixes and security fixes that will need to take place. Because, I mean, as I said, Microsoft, we've got tons and tons of super smart people, and yet because we have to put the code, we have to put applications out there that can meet a huge number of requirements and allow a lot of different types of users in. There's always going to be some unique way that a bad actor is going to find to get in, because unfortunately, a lot of them are pretty darn smart too. So it's very realistic that there's going to be some ongoing security maintenance and so on. All right. Did my share just drop out?
No, seems good.
Sorry, I just heard a tone that I hadn't heard before. Okay, thank you. All right, questions? All right, let's talk about some generalities as it relates to tips and techniques for writing code. You know, some of these hopefully are pretty straightforward. Some of them are more nuanced. You know, don't write hard-coded login credentials. That I'm going to throw out, that might seem very, well, duh, but you know what? It's a lot less duh than you think it is, because what we've seen frequently, unfortunately, it's happened in Microsoft, but this is where checks and balances come in. coders during the early phases of developing an application to make things more expedient, they will go ahead and hard code a particular login. Normally, it's not a real user, right? But they'll hard code a login with the intent to go pull it out afterwards, and maybe the development phase took longer than they expected. Somehow it got forgotten, and code gets compiled, and it still has a hard coded login. Even though it might not be a real user, that login apparently gave it permissions to do something. The bad actor is probably going to find that. They're going to decompile it. They're going to find that information and do whatever they can do with those login credentials. That actually happens. Right? Use user authentication, randomize your session IDs. Does anybody know why the third one, randomize your session IDs, is important? And/or want to take a guess? All right, y'all need way more coffee than I have. So session IDs basically happen. They're a post authentication. Once a user's been authenticated, a session token is created with a session ID for access to that. There's a hacking terminology called session replay, where if the bad actor can gain access to the communications path and be able to do a man-in-the-middle attack, they can grab that session ID. And if you are just basically, once a user is authenticated and you never check the session ID again, or you never randomize it, that bad actor can keep replaying that session and lying to your application that, yep, I'm still here. Oh, we're still good. Oh, trust me, I already authenticated. Look, it's in my session token. I've already authenticated. You don't need to do that anymore. If you don't randomize your session IDs, the bad actor could stay doing a bad thing for a while. Remember, I started out my call by saying, there's a lot of stuff going on in the wild that I can't tell you about. I just had a very large customer this week that discovered that they had an A10 attack. It's a well-known attack, man-in-the-middle session where they hijack sessions, and we were able to get it stopped. Yes, they have some of our tools. They did not have the rest implemented, and as I said before, you got to be right 100% of the time. The bad actor only has to be right once. They just found one of the workstations that had not been onboarded with the security tool sets and used it. Okay, so it's very real, very much happens, right? You can read the rest of these. Any questions on any of the rest of these? All right, now I'm going to make somebody. I'm not going to talk anymore unless somebody answers this. Why didn't I mention multi-factor authentication as one of these techniques that you as a code developer need to accommodate?
You know what we should have done was made it a icebreaker.
Too late.
Hey, I'm making it an icebreaker now. Come on, somebody give me an answer. Right or wrong, doesn't matter. This is the part of using your head. Somebody's got to be brave out there.
Number 8 wins recognition. There we go. Bibiana.
Repeat the question real quick.
Sure, thank you. So I have all these tips and techniques mentioned in here. Multi-factor authentication, MFA, is always super critical. How come I didn't list that as one of the tips and techniques that coders would need to use for writing their safe and efficient code? Like I said, you can take a guess.
Or raise your hand and I'll highlight you.
Bibiana, we couldn't hear you if you said something.
Oh, sorry. I'm just like trying to think about why you wouldn't put it in
Sure.
here.
Okay, Talia raised her hand too. So go ahead, Viviana, give your guess and then we'll have.
Give it a shot. Talia, you want to give it a shot?
I'm sorry. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I got you.
Multi-factor. I'm not like really sure. I guess because
Okay.
maybe you can
Go ahead.
Can a bot fill out multi-factor authentication too?
Kind of. A bot, not usually a bot, but a multi-factor, if you're using the wrong type, certainly can be spoofed. So that would be true. But refining my question, These are tips and techniques that I listed for, as it says, creating safe and efficient code, telling you things to look for. One of the things I didn't mention, I didn't put MFA in there, and there's a reason why I didn't. And I'm just trying to see if anybody has an understanding of maybe why wouldn't MFA apply to code writing.
So Taryn put down MFA can still fail, and then Talia Benson, please give your answer.
Okay.
To my knowledge, a lot of multi-factor authentication is already out there. So it would kind of be a waste of time to just code it yourself when you already have the option to just use it from like reCAPTCHA or whatever if you need to.
All right, respectable answer. Thank you. Thank you for answering. Like I said, this is part of I wanted people to think. And the only way you can answer this type of question is to, you in your mind, you have to go, well, what do I know about multi-factor authentication? Okay, do I trust it? Are there multiple methods? So here's why I purposely don't have it in there. Multi-factor authentication is post logon. So in other words, multi-factor authentication will not trigger until after the user has already authenticated and provided their appropriate username password if they're not doing a passwordless logon. So the idea is your code, if you're asking for username password combinations, once that's been validated by the authentication source, the identity source, that's when MFA might get triggered. So it's actually, you might leverage the MFA return token showing that it's been complete and use that as a checkbox that, hey, this user has to authenticate, has to have a session token and an MFA token, but you're not coding for it. It's actually the identity source that has to do that. But having said that, the other answers that y'all gave are also true. I was looking for something a little different, but they are true. They, for instance, MFA, everybody's used to the traditional MFA of I'm going to send you a text, right? I'm going to send an SMS text. That's easy to simjack, right? I guarantee if I knew any of your names out there, most likely you got something posted out on social media. I can probably go find your name on social media, go find your contact info. Somewhere in there, I'm probably going to find your cell phone number. And it's a 99.9% sure that when you selected MFA for authentication, you used your cell phone number because that's how it's going to contact you, right? So I already know your number. All I have to do is go steal a phone, use a burner phone. I can go ahead and put your phone number in and then request MFA using SMS text. Guess what? So if I've already hacked your username password and I needed that MFA, I can just basically lie to the system that my phone is your phone, and then all of a sudden I'm getting that MFA text. Right, and which is why we don't trust those anymore.
Let me share an experience with you guys. I was trying to sell a piece of furniture, and this person contacted me and said, I'm going to send you a Google code, and that will let me know that you're real. So they sent me the code, and they kept bugging me to share it, and it bothered me. And so I shared it with them. And I know, and I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. And then at the same time, I was researching, I researched it real fast and went, oh shit, afterwards. Sorry for swearing, but that's exactly what I said.
Yep.
Fortunately, I had two-factor authentication on my system. And so my Google account asked me if that was really me. So I could say no. They asked me for another one. And then of course I realized that they were bad players. So you see, they could easily go in and pretend to be me to get that code and then use me as the intermediary to get the code. So they don't even need to know your password, username, and password. They just need to interact with you. So be aware that that's another little game that they play out there. So
yeah. That's and thank you for bringing that up. Here's your public service message.
Yeah.
If you're buying, selling anything on the interweb, specifically like Facebook Marketplace, Nextdoor, on you're going to get the, hey, send me your, I want to buy this. Send me your cell phone number. My answer is always no. This communication will be just fine. Messenger. Oh, I need to send you a code to prove who you are, and now I just feel like being a jerk because I already know, right? It's like I don't need to prove who I am. You need to prove who you are. I'm the one selling it. It's like, just don't even play the game. Okay. In the interest of time, Thank you. All right. Let's discuss a couple other things here. Low code, no code.
Rich, we do have a question.
Oh, yes, please. Go ahead.
Talia, when given the option, what MFA method, IG, or for example, SMS, authenticator app, or other, would you recommend for users when they're presented the option?
Sure. So a lot of what you're always going to find is going to be depends. So I'm going to do the depends. Depends on the particular application or the type of application I'm talking about. As you heard me just state, great question, by the way. As you heard me state, SMS is always going to be the no bueno. I try to talk my customers out of using it because that can be spoofed. I am a big fan of the Microsoft Authenticator app. Google makes one as well. I work for Microsoft, so I'm not talking about Google's app. Okay. Those are really good applications because of the way they interact. They are basically a trusted source. So that is a good one. My true answer would be the best way to keep from having username password combination hacked is to not have a password. So passwordless logon, either using something like security keys. If that'll work. There we go. Security keys, or in my case, Microsoft, we make Microsoft Surface. We have a thing called Windows Hello for Business. So this same camera that I'm using, my system is rated, it's a Surface laptop. My system is rated for Windows Hello for Business. It actually has 2 cameras in it. When I set up my profile on this laptop, it's looking at my face and taking a digital representation of my face. There's also an IR camera built in, so I can't just take a picture and hold it up of me because it's not real. So that is more trusted. I'm going to make a statement. You can believe me or not, but it's true. I have worked for Microsoft for 7 years. For the last 2 years, I have a Microsoft account and I have a password. I do not know what that password is. I keep it vaulted. I have an application that is password vault, and I keep it vaulted, protected through my authenticator app. But the idea is I'm using passwordless authentication. When I walk up to my laptop, it looks at my face, recognizes I am who I am, and lets me in. And then that whole concept of single sign-on, now that I've been authenticated, I can get anywhere else that my user object would be. Well, I don't have enough time to go into details in this call, but the idea is the reason passwordless works is because there's no man-in-the-middle attack that can get to that. Because there is no password sharing, there's nothing to compromise. And so therefore, the bad actor has no way to get around that. So passwordless, security keys and so on are by far the most secure. Something like an authenticator app would be the next level. And then the lowest level would be SMS. Okay, great question. While I'm talking, I assume people have probably been reading the screen. So the 3 main, as a coder, the 3 main things that you have or will hear quite a bit about are the whole low code, no code, generative AI. And I think there's not a great understanding of what those are, right? So low code, basically low code and no code have similarities in that they literally mean you're using something like a Visual Basic tool where you're dragging and dropping and making an application by going, okay, I need this data source. I need this input. I want to accept these sources. And the code is actually being written for you behind the scenes by that application. So you're doing the visual drag and drop implementation, where the difference between low code and no code is the output. No code means I'm doing all that thing, and what it generates, that's what it can do. Its limitation is it's based strictly off of templates and libraries. So if the code that you, if the piece that you ultimately need is not available, then that's your limitation for no code. Low code means that when it allows you to be much more rapid in developing code. Maybe you have to learn a little bit less code, but it's not no. It's not having no knowledge of code writing. It's entirely possible you might need to custom tailor or add some widgets or add some lines of code in there to further refine what it can do outside of the templates that you might have been able to leverage. So it does require less training, but is not none. Generative AI, that's also a term you may or may not hear. You're going to hear a lot AI. AI, as in artificial intelligence, has been around a long time. Microsoft ourselves, we have been using it for years and years and years. Our Microsoft Azure, the back end, our main security interface in the back end has been using AI for many years, along with behavioral analytics. Okay. These days, when you're hearing the term AI, what they're really referring to is this newer generation of like OpenAI and ChatGPT and so on. Its full name is called generative AI. I hope its name doesn't become Terminators in the future, but the idea is generative AI is AI that learns based on the models that it's given. It can learn. So as as we as humans, or as you're feeding it more information in the background, it can learn and understand and make decisions based off of its understanding of that. Now realize, where limitations are going to come in. Generative AI doesn't have emotions. It might make a decision of, this is the proper activity to do because of X, Y, and Z, and that's all 100% correct, except if I were a human, I wouldn't do that because it's just wrong. Okay? So generative AI, it uses massive compute power. By the way, generative AI is almost always cloud-based because it's the only way that we can have enough compute power and memory and back-end resources to do that. It uses large language models and data, depending upon what it's supposed to do, large data models in the back end. So what's the main difference between generative AI as far as code writing? Well, the main difference is we're not writing any. You're more of the secretary. With generative AI, you're gathering the requirements. You're going to take those requirements. You're going to go to whatever interface that particular generative AI happens to use, and you're going to type in. I gave you an example earlier. I need a piece of code that can generate this type of user interface, pull data in from these different sources, have an output of this, and then you can further refine it and further refine it. But the idea is you're not actually telling it how any of the code works. You're saying this is what I want it to do using the term you'll hear is natural language. In other words, you don't have to learn Cousteau query language, KQL, like we do in Microsoft Sentinel. You're using, write this for me, tell me about this, explain this to me. That's natural language. And I'm going to show you an example. I don't know. I'm going to show you an example of that. It is real. It is here today. We already have it. As a matter of fact, when I'm writing, when I was creating my PowerPoint, a couple of times it would come up because I have it as part of Microsoft 365. It would come up and say, "Did you mean this?" It's like, oh, yeah, I guess it did. Okay. So, and it's also built into like our web browser, Microsoft Edge. You now have direct ability to do queries in there. That is going to change your world a lot. Some for the better, some not so much. Like I said, the reality is code generation, it's going to create it for you. But as I put somewhere in the middle of there, just because it wrote it doesn't mean it's correct. It's still learning. It's not a baby, but it's still an infant, right? So the idea is you want to be able to, or you need people that are still skilled to, maybe you didn't write the code, but you still have to be able to look at the code, interpret it, and ensure that it meets the security requirements and the regulatory requirements and the input and the output and the least privilege access. Maybe you didn't tell the application, by the way, do this and provide least privilege access. Well, the shortest distance between 2 points is this way. Well, the problem is it also bypasses all these other checks and balances that maybe you need. So just because it can do it doesn't mean it's the end all be all. Securing your work. My screen. Okay, how does a typical attack begin? So this is more generic, so I'm taking this level up. Let's talk about bad actors and how they even get into the environment and so on, right? The threat. So organizations are typically built out, let me rephrase, better organizations, right? If they've got their stuff together, they don't have everything just in one big access level with the same person having all access to everything. Usually they're broken out into different levels of tiers based on the requirements of that organization, who maintains and uses it. I mean, classic example on the screen here, you've got tier 0, which would be the domain and enterprise admins, where they have the need to be able to create connectivity between multiple different domains. They have the ability to create a domain and define how users are created and how all the inner workings are. And then you've got a tier 1, server admins, okay? A server admin, do they have any need to create a new Active Directory? No. Do they have a need to deploy additional servers and assign rights to them? Yeah, they do. So the tier depends on remember that least privilege access, right? Tier 1 pretty much has access to everything, or most likely does. Tier 0. Tier 1 has access to servers, and in this case, tier 2, that's workstation and device admins. You know, maybe it could be service desk, help desk. Just because somebody's maintaining the laptops and desktops, should they have any access to the backend server? In most organizations, no. Granted, if it's a smaller shop, you know, that guy, gal might be responsible for both of them. But in an actual enterprise, no, they're not going to. So they're going to be broken up into tiers. So that means that when the bad actor is trying to go after information within the organization, they typically have to go through a whole process to get there. I just added there, what is the bad actor going after? In most all cases, they're going after your intellectual property and data. Wait, what? But a phishing attempt is trying to get my password. Yes. They're trying to get your password. Are they getting your password because they want to steal your identity? Kind of, but no, they're not trying to steal your identity. If we take a step back, ignore that I'm talking about an organization, let me take a step back and talk about me as an individual. If I get a phishing attempt, ignore that Navy Federal, against me. Are they trying to do identity theft? Yes, they do. They want to get my username, password. They want to be able to get into applications, things like my bank accounts, my Amazon account. Maybe they want to go order a bunch of cool stuff and don't want to pay for it, right? They want to be able to impersonate me so they can use my identity to go, you know, either steal my funds, steal my home, you know, run up credit card bills, open new credit cards. That's what they're after. They're actually after my identity. Going back to this, in an organization, an enterprise, the bad actor is not going after the individual because of their identity. The identity is the lowest level. It's the entry point to get into the environment, which again circles all the way back to that zero trust. If I, as an organization, if I've implemented zero trust properly, that means any particular individual within an organization only has enough rights to do what their job details require them to do and no more. So in this example that I'm showing on the screen, tier 0, 1, 2, if you are a workstation admin and the bad actor is able to make their way into the environment, compromise that user's object, can they compromise the domain? No. Can they get onto a server and gather compromised data on the server and maybe do a ransomware attack? No. If least privilege access has been incorporated, somebody in a tier 2 does not have access to a tier 1 or a tier 0. See how this is all playing in? So the typical entry point is, you know, establishing an entry point and trying to find that weakest link. That one person that's going to try to click on the dancing cat video, or There's so many techniques that I could go into. So once they've got that, now what are they trying to do? Well, part of what they're going to do is when they compromise a user object, they're not going to go and use that user object. What they're going to do is they're going to sniff around. They're going to root in. They're going to see who that user talks to. They're going to look at their emails and they're going to see who they communicate with. If they're lucky, that person that they compromised actually has some other elevated permissions, but maybe they don't. But maybe if they're looking through their emails, they're going to find out who their approving manager is. They're going to find out they had a service desk call a while back, and now they know the name of a person that's on the service desk. I bet that service desk person has some additional privileges. They're going to find out who communicates with whom. And then what they're going to try to do is use that person, impersonate that person that they've just compromised, and maybe go back to that service desk person and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this. Can you log into this workstation and do this? And they're going to be doing like key logging and so on. And when they're logging in, they're now going to try to grab their credentials. So that's how this whole thing is going to play out. Here's a stat for you. When we, Microsoft, when our direct action response team, or incident response team is what they're now renamed, when they go in and help a customer that has been affected by, say, a ransomware, on average, we find that the bad actor has already been in the organization's environment, rooting around and finding out who does what for upwards of 200 days. They don't just jump in, compromise a user object, and go do a bad thing. They've been sitting there. Why steal John Smith's data when I can go after the whole enchilada? Okay? Lateral movement, super important. If they're really good, depending upon what their goal is, then they're going for a privilege escalation and try to get something higher, the tier zeros, the domain admin credentials, right? So that they can impersonate, because, pardon me a second. Let's say the person that they compromised doesn't have access to backend data sources. The domain admin typically has what we call God rights, basically rights across the entire environment. So if they can compromise the domain admin, they're not doing it so they can create new connections to other domains and so on. They could, but no, they're not going to do that. Shoot, that's going to be sniffed out in a second. No, they're going to do that because it then gives the power to get to locations like, I don't know, maybe on a file server where, say, the backup logs are stored, that they can wipe and then remove the trace that it was wiped, so there's no backup sources. So now when I do a ransomware, they have no ability to go and restore back from a backup because, well, there aren't any, right? So that's how those work. And then after they've finally gotten the privileges they think they need, they know who they're talking to, now they execute whatever their attack is. And the attack du jour these days is ransomware. I will throw out there, by the way, ransomware, as it relates to computer data, is successful because organizations put a lot of stock, if you will, in their data. A lot of times ransomware will be pay us or we're going to destroy your data, not let you have access to it again, or pay us and we're going to release this information out into the wild and everybody's going to see whatever it is that they're worried about not seeing. Could be intellectual property, could also be bad actors from nation states that are literally trying to get your plans for your F-55 new fighter jet you're building, right? So the idea is, the other thing I'll leave with ransomware is another reason why it's successful. Organizations that do choose to pay the ransomware, they have a high rate of success of getting their data released, because in most cases, the bad actors, it's a business for them. It's how they're making their money. If they hold an organization for ransomware, they get paid and then they don't release it, that word's going to get around. Now, when they hold another organization for ransom, do you think that other organization is going to give them money? Why? They now know, hey, you're not trustworthy. I know, shocking, right? A threat bad actor is not trustworthy. But hey, this last guy paid you and you didn't give them their data back. Why in the heck would I ever pay you? So believe it or not, the bad actors actually are kind of trustworthy. They usually will, to an extent. And one of the things that you can't ever know is, did they make copies of it later on in the future? Great, they gave you your data back, but they also then looking through it and go, wow, we discovered some nefarious activities going on that you guys are doing yourself. Hey, pay us again, or we're going to leak this data out. And now all of a sudden you're going to be in congressional investigations. Okay. All right, so you wrote your code. I just showed you how a user gets, how bad actors kind of get in generically to an organization, what they're doing, going after your data. So it is up to you and that team to now look at during, not only when you've written code, but when you're working on the code, you know, your source code as you're developing it. A typical development project isn't a week long, 2 weeks long, it's months, if not years, right? So there's going to be a lot of iterations and revisions, different teams, different code snippets. You have to have a place where you can store that, where it can be backed up, where it can be vaulted, where it can be checked in and checked out. Remember the tools I talked about? That's a prime reason why organizations usually will standardize on the tool set, because they want the tool set to be granted permissions to check in and out based on that user's least privilege. You see how this keeps coming back around? They want that control. So therefore, if they allow users to use, coders to use any application, they lose control of the ability to protect the source code. So that's why they're okay. So these are some of the things that you have to take into account. Right? All right, now I'm going to show you, so now I'm going to take you a little bit into and out of the world of code development, and I'm going to put specifically on my Microsoft hat because I work for Microsoft and it's fair for me to represent. Microsoft realizes that there is a valid and viable need to be able to protect the data, and not only protect the data, but as long as we're protecting it, maybe we should be able to look for vulnerabilities within the code that was written and kind of help yourself, and maybe even do some of that debugging thing, right? So Microsoft, all of our threat and analytics tools are called Microsoft Defender. So Defender for DevOps is one of our latest. Defender for DevOps is specifically a tool set that allows development teams to be able to protect their code, gives the security, the security focused people, so not the code writers, the security focused people, to basically have an idea of what's going on, what's being stored where, what level of protection different pieces of code are being provided, who has access, who's checked stuff in, who's checked stuff out. Like I said, while we're at it, let's do a little bit of code scanning. You know, we know a lot about coding. We know a lot about secure coding. We look through a piece of code and we go, you know, you got these open things. Hey, remember that? Don't put a leaked credential in. Well, we kind of found one right here. So Microsoft Defender for DevOps has the ability, and you can look into here and see all of these. Questions on this? So this is something coming up. And by the way, where it says, if you're looking at my screen where it says preview, that goes back to the discussion around how Microsoft releases our applications. When I took this screenshot, it says preview. That means myself, my access, least privilege access, my access to this application is being provided because it's in public preview. We just dropped the public word. There's no reason for us to put it on here. If I see preview and I wasn't purposely invited to a private preview, then it's public. Okay. So what we do is we do the code development, we do the internal testing, we do, many times you'll hear us a term that you'll hear in the industry called dog fooding. Eat your own dog food. Hey, you made it, you make sure it works. Why would I not use my own product to make sure that it does what it's supposed to? If I'm going to sell it to somebody else and I say it's going to protect this, shouldn't I trust it to protect that same thing for me. So dog fooding means a lot of times you might be using that code yourself for a while as it's being developed. Then Microsoft will solicit vendors, organizations of particular sizes, depending upon what the app is planning on doing. We invite them to a private preview. There's some handshaking behind the scenes. You do this private preview for us. When it's released, we'll give it to you at 50% off the retail cost. You get dedicated care and feeding from a specific development team that if any bugs or anything are found, they will, you'll have them on speed dial, right? So there's a process we do. That's private preview. Once it's passed all those bars, now we're going to open it up further. Now it shows up as preview. So now I get to see what's coming out. I get to kick the tires, get to try it out. It's still open for feedback. If I see something that doesn't work the way I expect, or I click on something and the data maybe isn't presented in a good usable way, we still take feedback. And then at a point when it gets finally released and has gone through the verification step, basically the certifications that are required for whatever this app is going to be, now it becomes a paid product. So customers, when it's in preview, aren't paying for it. That's how Microsoft, as a code development organization, that's how we work. So everything I told you is pretty reasonable to expect. Something, in that general order of who you might go to work for. Could be Microsoft, great company to work for, by the way. Questions to this point? Kind of zoomed in a little bit here while you're thinking of questions. So this is what I do for a living. So this is the stuff that I do. I don't write the code. I help. I work for Microsoft in the state and local government side. So all my customers are either an entire state, which is how I got to work with Hawaii, different cities, counties, municipalities, public utilities, law enforcement, fire, all those things that are part of a city entity. So I work with all the customers of that. And then my job is to gather their requirements. Part of what I bring to the table is knowing what the threats are out there and how they're acting, and where their vulnerabilities might be, and being able to point that out to my customers and show them how we can help them stay out of the news, keep their data protected, and be productive. And I'm making it accomplish. Got a little bit of time left. Let's hit the other newest stuff. Microsoft, in my opening slides, I put Microsoft this year. We jumped the gun ahead of most of our competitors, and we heavily invested in a company called OpenAI. By heavily, I mean we invested $13 billion. We invested more, which doesn't mean we bought the company. It means we're investing in their success. So we invested more in that than some companies even make. The vast majority of customers, organizations even make. We invest $5 billion a year generically just in security. $5 billion in security. So we put our money where our mouth is. So I told you Defender is the name of all our threat and analytics products. Copilot is the name of all of our generative AI add-ins that are coming to market. They are some of them have already started, like Copilot for Edge. The next one being released is Microsoft 365 Copilot. After that will be Security Copilot, which is primarily where I do, and I'm going to show you an example. What I'm showing you now, by the way, has nothing to do with code writing, but start thinking about where I told you earlier, generative AI, what it can do. The purpose of generative AI, as far as we're concerned, is to allow organizations, one, to be more efficient, perform tasks quicker, not necessarily with less people. We want, because they already have not enough people. So it's not a push to get rid of people. It's to say, hey, let's do better with the people you have. But the reality is the threats out there, they're happening at internet speeds, not at human speeds. So no matter how many humans you throw against it, you're never going to be able to combat against it. You need something that can combat it. What can combat computer speeds better than, right? And so what comes to bear or will be coming to bear is the add-ons, where the different tools will add basically interface boxes, if you will, that you can just type in. And I'm showing you one. I'm looking at the screen. I'm showing you one here. You know, like on the left, or yeah, on the left. These are some typical. This is what it means by natural language, right? Without you having to write any code. So these are the type of things where, say, a SOC analyst, a security analyst would be looking at. And when we take a look at the right, up at the top says, how can I improve my security posture? Generative AI went through and looked at all the stuff that was within their environment through the tools that we're providing. It looks at all the recommendations that the tool sets itself already made. It's then noodling on that, consolidating and bringing back and say, based on all the information we've discovered, here are the top things. Pretty cool, huh? So let me see. Trying to do the wrong thing. Hold on a second here.
Well, Rich is bringing that up. I want to answer a question I got on the system. The security question is a 300-word response to what you would do. We understand that this is not something you can implement quickly, so we don't actually expect your apps or your solutions or your prototypes to have security formally implemented. But we do need to know that you thought about it and what you concluded you need to do. So I hope that clarifies to everybody. When I say you need to answer a security question, that it's answer a question, not to actually implement it in your code at this point in time. Good, everybody? Sorry, Rich, back to you.
No, it's all good. Again, I'm just giving you a little primer of what, if you were SOC analyst using some of these tools. So you can think about these somewhat similar in a code development. We don't have a security copilot for code development released at this point, so there's nothing I can show you yet. So I'm just kind of giving you an idea of the type of things. So this is something, I'll say simplistic, but not. If I'm a SOC analyst and alerts were thrown and an incident was created in our environment, our Microsoft 365 security environment, it gets assigned an incident number. And then the SOC analyst could go through and look at everything in there and then start interpreting what all this means. With generative AI, it can say, hey, can you summarize for me? There you go. That's what it did. That's, a first example of this, right? So it's telling you, hey, here's the summary. Here's what happened. Here's the IPs. Here's these things. And it's like, well, you know what? I want to dig in further. So now I'm going to ask it. Sorry, I can't see the bottom of the screen. Can you elaborate more on the entities? And there's a little bit of a delay while it does its thing. And it's going to go look at that information, compile it, and bring it back. So you can see that each of the entities that were involved in that particular incident, the hosts, the user objects, it can tell you what we know about it. So this is an opportunity to drill in. And then you can even go to the next level. Again, sorry if I'm looking over it. I have a bigger screen. I'll just go one more level, but hopefully you're getting the idea of what generative AI is designed to do and what an interface, how do you use it, right? So if you look at the bar on the bottom, the interface, does that look like you need some really unique training to be able to use it? No. That's That's the whole point of natural language. Now, if when you are involved in generative AI, always understand another moniker that I'm sure all of you heard before: garbage in, garbage out, right? If you do not give generative AI good information as part of its data set, it will be making bad inferences or bad recommendations based off of the garbage you gave it. I'm going to be blunt. If I were to ever point generative AI at Wikipedia, the world as we know it would get really crazy, because Wikipedia is so far from the truth. The problem with Wikipedia is anybody can add information in there. It's not validated, and there in any particular piece of Wikipedia, there could be truths, there could be half truths, and there could be flat out lies, but it's allowed in there. What if you use that as the training model for generative AI, and then you ask it, tell me something about, the War of 1812, or tell me about the Vietnam War, or something like that, right? You're going to get some really interesting inferences from there because of the data model that it learned from. So that's a big caution for AI, is you have to be very careful about the data you give it that it gets to learn from. AI is a young child. It's not a baby, it's a young child. And when you're teaching a young child good and bad, you have to be really careful. I think if you've had any opportunities, it's funny how humans and even dogs, they pick up the bad thing really quick, and the good thing somehow takes longer. So just be careful when you're working with AI and what you give it, because you can get some really interesting stuff. Okay. There were a few more of these, but in general, this is my presentation for today.